Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Center of Gravity. Um, this is one of our sessions where we are trying to have regular conversations on different kinds of subjects. Today's topic is about human-centered thinking. We have Dilip, one of the co-founders of Center of Gravity. To those who have followed Center of Gravity, who have worked with them, who have collaborated with them in the past, know exactly what Center of Gravity does. So, no introduction for you. You don't need one. But for those, I think we have a lot of people who are new to our platform today. So for them, here's a small introduction. Center of Gravity Consulting is a pioneer of a concept called as human-centered thinking. It's very simple, right? I mean, the name kind of speaks for itself. But it's the beauty lies in its simplicity. It can be applied to business. It can be applied to strategy, to your marketing, to the way you think about products, to the way you service your customers. And there's a lot more to it, everything under the sun. So we have Dilip here today. He will help us take all of you guys through what is human-centered thinking. So Dilip, would you want to start? I believe you have a story for us.
Sure. I'll do that. Thank you, Sandhya. So, as you said, it's a very simple concept, human-centered thinking. But I think down the line, how organizations take decisions, it's not that humans are at the heart of decision making. So when we started our practice, we felt that there's a lot of value in bringing the people at the heart of decision making, and some of the reasons could be, uh, if you all of us who have worked in organizations, we know the kind of pressures, the business pressures we go through, and what really drives us is language like growth, profitability, market share, gross margins. That is what really drives us. And in that context, you understand people as consumers. Primarily as consumption units. They come across as data points, and we try to neatly fit them into 2 by 2 boxes and try to make sense of them. But actually, in reality, we are much more complex. So when we started our practice, the thought was that if you really understand people as people with all its complexities, wouldn't that be a better way to understand them, understand their needs, how they view organizations, and from there, if you do the right things, growth, profitability, etc., naturally should happen. So that is the premise in which the what human-centered consulting means. What I'll do is that the best way to illustrate, as you said, is through a story. Yeah. So this is it's a story which is a decade back, and this is a bank which came to us from the northernmost part of India, a very beautiful state. And this institution was a iconic institution in that state. They're quite a large bank. I mean, their revenue would have been in somewhere in 600 million USD. Assets would be around close to $11 billion. They would have employees, around 12,000, number of branches. So it's quite a large institution, an iconic bank. So this particular state had missed the industrial wave that India went through. So it's primarily an agrarian society. It's horticulture, floriculture. I mean, that's the kind of, and there are services like tourism, handicraft kind of industries which exist. And this was a time where the economy was started booming, and there were other banks which was entering the state, primarily the private sector banks from the other parts of India, who are known to be more customer friendly, much more savvier the way they communicate and all of that. And this bank has got 60% market share. So they called us saying that, see, things are really great, but we want to ensure that we protect our market share and keep growing. And there are these new banks coming in, so we'll have to prepare ourselves. And normally, when you think about branding, branding is normally thought of things like maybe changing your logo, which many banks went through that point of time, renovate your retail premises, and then come with a nice campaign. I mean, that's how branding is understood, right? So let me take you through this story of, if you have to look at the same problem from a human-centered view, how does it look like? So this is the story of Javed. Javed is one of the core customers of this bank, which is like 60% of the population of people in that place would be like Javed. So when I meet Javed, he's in his 40s, and Javed is a taxi driver. So he is married, he's got a family of 3 daughters, right? And so as part of the work, I plan to meet Javed, and I go to his house. So he lives in the town. I mean, it's the capital of the state. And he has built this beautiful home, a small home, which is very colorful, and it's 800 square feet. And I walk into his house. And this place, you can access people only if you have some contact. So somebody from the bank had arranged in. I go in, and Javed is also really curious, who's this guy, because I look different. I don't speak the language.
You're also
So
not from the state, so
I'm not from the state, so he knows that I'm. So I then give him a sense of what do I do, and this is what I do, and it's a very hospitable region. So you can't start a conversation, without having the chai and the entire, rituals that go around it. And so when the conversation starts, Javed is there and his mother, who's sitting in the same room. And he starts his journey. So we try to understand, who's Javed. I mean, that's like the first part. And so Javed comes. So when I walk into the house, Javed says, "I see this is a middle class locality," and I really didn't get the connection of what is he trying to say. But he was giving me a sense of how the town is laid out and which part of the city is what kind of people stay, and this is the middle class locality. And Javed talks about his life. So he comes from a family of five, and he's being the elder one. And Javed's father was a carpenter. So he lived in a locality which was far away from this middle class locality, and he talks about saying that it's neither a slum nor a middle class locality; it's somewhere in between. And his family for the two generations have lived in that locality. And he said that his childhood was a complete roller coaster ride because father was a carpenter. There is no certainty in the job. So there are weeks where you get a lot of orders and he's really busy, and then there are weeks where there is no work that happens. So and he describes it pretty much like a snake and ladder kind of a life. There is a medical emergency happens in the house, and then you're back, and then there is a marriage can happen in the house, or some other emergencies can completely take you off. And he says that sometimes this can take a couple of generations for you to overcome this. That's the kind of hit which really really happens. And Javed, the growing up years itself, is very clear that he doesn't want to get into the carpentry profession. And by the time he's in seventh, eighth standard, there's a lot of pressure from the family, and he also knows that education is not going to get him anywhere. Everyone talks about he's the black sheep in the family, gets compared with his cousins, and so there is a lot of pressure for Javed, and he says that his mother was very particular to ensure that the way, for instance, when he goes out of the house, the way he is dressed, or she will ensure that that the his hair is in a certain way, so he comes across as a decent child, which should represent people from the middle class families. And when the conversation is happening, Javed's mother is on the side, she has this smile on her face. And Javed, what happens is that, so he doesn't want to get into the carpentry business, which his father is currently doing. And he discovers from one of his friend who's running a medical shop, and he feels that maybe that's something which could be a good escape route. So he wants to start a medical business. But for that, you need to have a pharmacy diploma. And he figures out that a friend of his who's in Delhi, which is the capital of India, that he can potentially after 12th go and get a degree, I mean, a diploma from there. So that journey pretty much happens, and he somehow manages to secure a diploma. But now he needs to have a loan to go and do this, and that's the first time he interacts with the bank. And this conversation is happening. This is now almost a decade has gone by when this incident has happened. And I can pretty much see the emotions on Javed's face. And he's saying that when I walk into the bank, I mean, it's really chaotic. And during this phase, we also had gone to the bank, we had done observations, and there is the bank is like pretty crowded because there are a lot of pensioners who come. So try to navigate to figure out where do I get the loan itself is a task. Once you reach there, and then the kind of questions they ask, the kind of documents you need to produce, it's pretty much like an interrogation, which almost Javed feels that saying that, are you worth this? Do you want to really do this? He almost had a fight with his father before even going to the bank. The father is saying that, why you want to take a loan for education? I mean, for business, still it makes sense. And then he sees how his dad gets treated. So there are a number of rounds that he has to, first he goes there, and then they say a certain kind of a documents they need to get. And then they come back after a week, and then the documents entirely changes, or the person who told completely changes from there. And there is this constant humiliation which happens, and then there's this identity robbery that takes place. By the time you come out from the bank, you feel that you're no one. And if you look at Javed's life, he's stuck, and he's not completely in the slum, and he's not in the middle class, and it's almost a feeling that you don't have the permission to come to this place because you don't have the documents which supports that. So what happens is that he lost that opportunity, and he couldn't get a loan, and then he couldn't go to Delhi, and he continues his graduation. But by second, third year, he figured out that this is not going to take him anywhere. And finally, he says that, no, I want to get out from this place because there is too much of pressure. And there is his friend who is in Bombay who runs a taxi business. So Javed migrates to Bombay and he becomes a taxi driver. And but when he talks about that, he's saying that while the life was really tough, I mean, he was sharing a small place with four people, and anyone who's familiar with Bombay, you know how the life can be there.
Yeah.
But the entire anonymity of there is no caste and class distinctions. There is certain kind of professionalism. People respect for who you are, and all of those things as actually, he starts enjoying it. And I also remember, like, after that, Javed is the one who used to come and pick me up from the airport whenever I used to visit for this job. And he's always very punctual and he used to take a lot of pride in that. So he enjoys that Bombay stint, and some part of his professional ethics comes from that. And he still keeps on saying that I worked in Bombay, sir. The Bombay, the way the people in Bombay behave is very different, but we are not like that, all of that. And 4 years after working in Bombay, Javed gets a call that his father passes away. And so now he has to come back to the place, and he has to support his family. There is no option, so he comes back. And the only profession now he knows is driving. And so he thinks of getting a second-hand car. By the time, what happens is there's pressure in the family. He has to get married for some stability in the family, etc. And unlike the middle class normally don't take risk once you get married because you have a lot to lose, right? And then you tend to do the safe game, and you do all your funds before the marriage.
You settle
But
down.
you're settled down. But in Javed's case, and people who come from there, marriage is which actually triggers saying that you need to take a risk. If not, you're going to get stuck here for your life. So you have to take a risk. So that's where he thinks of starting a small business. So he says thoughts of getting a car. And again, now he goes to the bank. So by the time he feels that he has changed now because he has gone from this place, he's gone to Bombay, he's seen a different life. He's a success in his life in some form, and that's how he's walking into the bank. But he's still an invalid in front of the banker's eye, right? And so again, the number of documents that is asked, and every conversation is saying that you are not credit worthy because the bank's loans are not designed for people who don't have money. It is for people who have money. And
Yeah.
so, for instance, Javed needs a loan of $2,000. The bank will say, "I will give $1,500," but that doesn't help. Where do you get the next $500? So it is, and you have to get it in the right time. If not, you can't start a business. So, like a couple of months goes in this entire journey, and it is. He says that it's not, sir, about the interest rate and the money. It's the way I am treated. That itself says that I don't want to go through it anymore. And finally, he lands up with a money lender who gets the money. Now, when the entire thing is happening, Javed is telling that, so where this money comes from for the money lender. The money lender is a guy who stays outside my state. It can be from a place like a Delhi or a Bombay, who takes the money from my bank, who's got a branch outside, at an interest rate which is much lower than that we get there. He comes back to my state and he actually gives me that money. And he says that this is my money which I have deposited, and I get humiliated, and somebody goes and takes this, and he gives me in the timely manner. He's very helpful, all of that, and at least he talks to me with respect. And this is not the story of Javed. It's the story of many people. We meet people like horticulturists, floriculturists, and the conversation after conversation, you have a similar kind of a life script and similar kind of a story with the bank. And people are extremely angry with the bank. And people feel that, this is an authoritarian, it's a very patriarch, it's a bank that we really look up to, but when it needs help, we don't, it doesn't really come in a. So people are extremely angry and they're looking for the competition to come into the valley so they can really shift, right? Now, if you listen to the story, everything that you need to take decisions, to formulate a strategy, everything is in this. To start off with a question like, who is your core customer? There are Javeds and there are a lot of other people. And so who are the people that will be core of this bank and where the business will come from? That's the first thing. Second, what is that they're really looking for? Are they looking for personal loans? Are they looking for a great service? Are they looking for business loans? And business loans of what nature? Because these are all traders, and your typical product really doesn't work for them because you have to. There are people who take money on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. So you need to have shorter loan, maybe a high interest rate. So it needs to be designed very differently. So you get a sense of, if you have to cater to him, what you need to do. Who's your competitive context? That becomes clear. What's the kind of pricing you need to charge? What's the kind of communication you need to do? Everything becomes so clear, once you have the story. And that is the heart of human-centered thinking. And it is. So when you start off, there is a lot of ambiguity. But if you go through a certain way of looking at the problem, you understand the problem, and it gives you enough confidence to take decisions, where to focus, where not to focus, where is the core, what is the not core. And that is what it brings. And in the process, it brings alignment and a conviction within the team saying that, hey, looks like Javed is the customer, and this is where we need to focus on. So that's in a gist, what human-centered strategy looks like.
But Dilip, I just have one question for you here. I appreciate what you just said. It's a beautiful concept, completely. But does a client really know what they're getting into when they come to you and tell you that I want to do X, Y, Z? What was the problem statement with which they came to you for, which then made you realize that, hey, I need to step back and do this activity?
Yeah. So, see, when clients come to us, they do have an understanding of the problem. So, if in this case, if you take, I mean, it was very clear that the competition is coming in, but it's not a very sharply articulated problem. It's almost like saying that there is competition coming in, and we need to protect our status, right? Now, what does that mean? That means how do I grow? I mean, there are many answers to that question, right? It's not very clear. So, what happens is that clients know broadly where they want to go into, but it's not very clear which are the levers I need to move for this, and where do I really focus to get there, right? So in this case, when we started off, the client had a feeling saying that maybe services is where we need to focus because the private sector banks are good in that. And because the economy is booming, maybe we should focus on personal loans because that's where the boom is going to happen and that's where the market is going to come from. So many times the value comes in diagnosing the problem, because in the diagnosing of the problem is where you understand where you need to focus. Because you could have pretty much, if you take the story, they could have focused on revamping the entire bank through a beautiful communication and a service a little bit improved. But you know this for the 60% of the population, that really doesn't make sense because you have not really diagnosed the problem. That is where your market share erosion potentially can happen or the growth can potentially come from. And then, so that is the biggest validation I feel, really understanding the problem and getting the diagnosis right.
So I'm assuming you met a lot more Javeds, and he was not the only one you spoke to.
Yes, yeah. So what happens is that you start off with the hypothesis,
Okay.
and so you don't just plunge into the market like that, right? So initially you have to get a sense of the organization and how the organization works, because eventually the customer that you need to attract needs to be a group that you can uniquely serve, right? So you do a conversation with the key stakeholders in the bank, so it can be the chairman, it can be made in different departments, so that is one important part of it. And once you have the hypothesis, then you say that who are the kind of people we need to meet, and you should have an open mind. So we are saying that we have to meet maybe people from, like if you take Javed's construct, people from the slums, maybe people who are like Javed, maybe people from the middle class customers, and maybe even the top end, who may be a cream of that audience at this point of time. And when you're doing the conversation, what happens is you get a sense of where is the intensity of the problem and where is the opportunity lie. And because you have an understanding of what this bank can uniquely offer. So when we are doing this, the bank's uniqueness is that they really understand the state. They are people from the state and they've got a wide network, right? No other bank will have that understanding. And at this point of time, this bank was lending 50% of their money outside the state with corporates, because you can go and wine and dine with the corporates and lend 8 to 10,000 crores or millions of dollars in one go. It's much more easy, but you don't have any differentiation there. You get only an interest rate of 5 to 6%, right? Which is very low when it comes to the Indian standards, But if you lend the same money back into the state, you can get anywhere between 16 to 17 to 18% because he's taking the money from the money lender at 20 plus, right? But this takes a lot of effort because 8,000 crores to be distributed among a retail audience, a lot of effort really goes into it, right?
Yeah.
So when you're going through this many Javeds and many other segments of people, you're getting a sense that, hey, problem is here, and this bank's uniqueness is here because no other bank can do that. And if you do that, it not only serves people like Javed, but also it makes tremendous business sense.
So Dilip, run me through this. What would it take if tomorrow I decide, okay, I'm sold, I want to start doing human centered thinking and consulting too? What are the skill sets that I would need to get on this path that you have been on for the past 2 decades, close to 2 decades?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a good question. So one is, see, what it allows us, if I really distill it, is that it allows you to take decisions when you have an ambiguous problem. So what it allows is that it gives you clarity, and then based on the clarity you can take decisions. So many a times today, there is a lot of emphasis on speed, that you have to take decisions fast, and agility and all of that, right? And then you don't have a clarity. You either get completely paralyzed, you don't take decisions because it's a scary space, or I take a decision based on whatever I understand, which is primarily the symptoms, right? So what it some of the skills that you will learn, one is that you will have to stop thinking like a manager, and you have to start thinking like a owner or like an entrepreneur. What it means is that you can't just look at a silo that you're working in. You have to get the entire context and that understanding. So that is what we will teach you in terms of a lens to look at it. So constantly, like even if you're working at on a digital part of the communication part of a agency, or you're an HR component, but you need to have this entire context. So one thing is that you have to think like an owner, and every time you take calls, you'll have this entire, so that's the organization context as well as the customer context, the competitive context, so that is what you need to do. That's the first thing. Second is that you'll have to develop a lot of humility, because often what we think is the problem and what we think is the solution may not be the case. Okay? So take multiple data points and try to contradict yourself consistently. That's what I mean by humility. You're able to change your stances on a regular basis till you come to the conclusion that this is the problem.
Like in Javed's case, when you
Imagine that.
thought, yeah,
Yeah. So you spend a lot of time. The skill is to understand the problem and diagnose the problem. And once you get that, the solution naturally comes. Okay. So the entire thing of the agility, etc., which people now talk about, in the problem part, you need to get that really right, and that's what this allows, and that's a skill set you will gain from it. What are the kind of questions you need to ask, and how should you get a sense of that? You're getting a sense of the diagnosis and the problem. That's one. The solution part is where you have to now think not like a banker but like a VC. In the sense, what do you mean by that is that you don't really get the solution absolutely right. You get the problem right. Solution is all about putting it into the market and then refining it and learning it on the way. So what happens is that, so why it allows you for decision making is that you broadly get the direction that you need to go because you understand the problem. The solutions may not be accurate, and don't even wait for accuracy. But if people now know, like if it's Javed's case, it was very clear that one thing if I have to fix, it is the business loans. And I have to structure the loan in a way that I get Javed. That's one. And second is the service. If I get that to right, but there are other things like communication, restructuring the bank. There are many things, but if I have only so much time and money, that's what I do. So in terms of, that's a couple of mindset changes that will happen. And the third part is that you will have to start empathizing with your customers like people. you know just be curious about them. And empathy is a strong word in a corporate context. Can you really do that even with our loved ones? Are we really empathetic? It's a question, right? But what
we
I
see
mean,
numbers on the sheet.
sorry,
All our clients are just numbers on the sheet.
numbers on the sheet. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what you actually, and see, this is what entrepreneurs again do. So when I say if the manager was an entrepreneurs, when they start their business, they actually roam around in the market. They go and talk to people. Because at the end of the day, they want results, right? So you need to act like that. You have to be out there. You have to make your strategy in the bunker, not so much in the boardroom. And this doesn't mean that you have to take a lot of time. Take a couple of days, roam around the market. You just go and be in the bank for one day. You know what people go through. Just sit with Javed and have few conversations. You'll get a sense what is happening. It's not rocket science, right? But for when you sit with Javed and when you're understanding it, still there are certain constructs that you need to go through to distill out things. Like what is a life script, and there is a logic to it because many a times we are programmed now for 7 years, and that's what you're trying to understand. What is the desires, what are the motivations, what are the anxieties, right? And what's the kind of questions that you need to ask, and then you're trying to see how that life script interjects with the category, and what is the category, what is the competition, right? So you have a broad construct, but you need to almost like lose control and be interested in the person, and maybe for that moment just psych yourself saying that you're this stranger to this new place, and you don't know much about them, and you don't have the judgment of who that person is. And these are some of the skills that you will learn on the way. But the net what it allows you is that you will have more confidence to take decisions in ambiguity.
But Dilip, this is a skill that you have honed over a span of decades, right? Uh, Years. How do you teach that to someone over a span of 10 weeks? How do you distill all of that?
Yeah. So the one thing is that you will understand the foundational principles of this work, and I feel that course is just the starting. And in fact, you will take, like all of us, maybe not a decade, but much, but even few years of practice to get a sense around it. So what we have done is that this is something which we have used to train to people who join us. So there is a certain process to it. We have also distilled down principles which work, and this is done over a period of time because it's a complete practitioner's guide. Because we are constantly experimenting, saying that what works, what the parts we need to tinker, and I could say that there is not a single project we have repeated anything. We have broadly this construct, but every time I start a project, still I have butterflies in my stomach. I really don't know
Really?
where it's going to end. Yeah. But you can trust the constructs that you will always land in a place which is more or less, you won't be completely wrong, right? So what we have done is that we have broken down this, into sizable chunks where you can absorb and you can make sense of it. So throughout the course, it's about when a problem comes, how do you really understand the problem? How do you do the initial hypothesis? And then really break it down, saying that who are the people that you should meet, which needs to be thought strategically. So there is a logic to that. What are the kind of questions you need to ask to get the right kind of information? How do you really conduct this kind of conversations? All of this gets really covered, right? So it's broken into bite size. But I feel the real learning comes only when you make it your own. So the entire course is structured in a way that you have to apply it. So you come to the course with a problem that you're facing, and throughout this 10 weeks, you have to apply it. That means you have to go and meet people. You have to conduct those conversations, and you have to maybe struggle a little bit with that. And every week, there is an intervention which happens with me, you know and there you can share your struggles, and say what are the challenges that you're facing, and then you move to the next week's course. So it is bite sized. So you'll have to give a minimum 2 hours in a week, minimum. But if you can give 4 hours, that is the best. So if you don't have that time, then you should not take this course. At some point of time when you're ready for it is when you should come to it. Otherwise, it's a waste of your the time and money. You should be able to apply this in your real life, and and make that tool of your own. So it's almost like a toolbox. It's almost like this is the branch, the trunk of the tree, right? Once you understand that, where the flowers and the leaves and everything needs to be put in, and that becomes much more clear. It's almost like a foundational course. And I feel that, I mean, you should speak to some of the students who went through a first batch to see whether how useful is it, how they can absorb something in 10 weeks and practice it.
I have one last question for you, Dilip, before we have one of our students. Um, how do you convince a client to get all of this done? Because in my experience, clients typically think they know who their customer is. They come up with this whole ensemble of assumptions that they have, either based on some X research or based on their own assumptions, or typical marketeers folly of thinking that the customer is just like you, right? How do you convince the clients?
Yeah. So one, you have to. So you're not here to say that your client is wrong. Okay. In fact, you start by saying that the client is right. Take everything at face value, because they have been doing this for years and they really understand their category and the customer. So it is right what they're saying, right? So you start off with that. And what happens is that most of the organizations work in silos. Like if I ask the question of who is your customer,
Yeah.
I ask even the marketing department. Let's say I go to the service department versus the customer complaint department versus the marketing manager versus the brand manager, and ask this question, you may broadly get a right answer saying that the 30 to 40 ACCA, X, Y, Z, this kind of a lifestyle, etc. But that is too broad, and you don't know what it means. But you specifically then ask the question, you can get contradicting answers, right? And then you're bringing this together, and then you're asking the client, so who do you think is the customer? And they may broadly say that this can be 2 or 3 hypotheses, but maybe we're not very clear. So that's the first time so you're allowing them to discover that maybe I don't have a complete understanding. It's not that I don't know, I don't have an accurate understanding, but I broadly know where it is, right? Okay, so you get that buy-in from the client because you're spoken to many people, you have come together, you've done this, and they say, okay, great. So you think that these are the 3 variants of the customer. Let's start meeting them. So you start going and meeting them, and when you do the conversation, you have to take your customers on this journey. One, if they don't have time, record these conversations, okay, and then play it where everybody is sitting together, all the people from whom you took the hypothesis, and everybody is watching it. And then you're not saying anything. People are saying that, oh, I didn't know it was Javed. I didn't know this was the problem that Javed went through. Oh, I didn't know it was business. I sure it is business, but so what happens is that now they are coming to their own conclusion by saying that maybe the core customer is slightly different. Maybe our products and services, some things are really working, something. So this is all, you're pretty much like a catalyst. And that's the beauty of the process. The beauty of the process is that you are not recommending things. You are allowing people to discover things, and that is what really creates alignment. And one of the big things about the way this work is practiced is that by the time the project is over, more or less people have a clarity. So when by the time the workshop was over, the chairman of the bank and everyone was sitting there and they said that, isn't this the reason that we joined this bank? Because there were the few privileged people who joined the bank, but that was the only institution where you could get a job. And there are memorable moments were when people like Javed actually got a loan and they came back and they wrote a thank you letter, or they came and talked to them by saying that my daughter has got this, or my business have started. That was the most memorable moments. And everyone aligns by saying that this is our core customer. This is why we started. This was the purpose of the bank. So it's not some fancy, beautiful words crafted, but I come to a conclusion that this is why, I need to work for 8 hours a day, and this is what will give me joy. But this is where the business also will come from. This is where I'll become profitable. In fact, after taking that call in 5 years, the bank's, profitability went by 5 times. So it is that process is where you allow people to discover, and this can be practiced with not only with clients. It can, when you practice with your loved ones, it can practice with your kids, because everyone, when they come to you, they have a worldview and they have a very strong feeling that I do understand, and you should respect that and take it for face value, and then try to understand where they come from, and in the process you discover. I mean, that's how the work happens.
So, Dilip, can you, before we move on, can you just give those of us who are listening to us, can you just give details of your course, when it starts, so on and so forth?
Yeah, so this is the second batch that we are starting. So this is starting from June 1st, and this is a 10-week course. So we have students who have been able to complete in 10 weeks. There have been students who have struggled to complete in 10 weeks because of time constraint, etc. So we are also thinking, should we make it 12 weeks, 14 weeks, so that's something we can figure out with the students. And the course is structured in a way that every week, like on a Monday, there are few chapters which will get released. And so we have got around 17 chapters, which cuts across from how to form the initial hypothesis, how to go about doing the research, how do you do the research, how do you do the analysis and synthesis of it, and finally, how do you formulate the strategy in terms of your vision, how do you make trade-offs, how do you position your brand, how do you bring all the marketing mix elements. That's broadly 17, and it's broken down into close to 92 lessons, small size lessons. 2 lessons. Wow. It's like 5 minutes, 5 minutes. So every week you may get one chapter with few lessons, which is you can spend between 45 minutes to an hour to absorb it. And this is I giving you a sense of the constructs, each of the constructs. And then there are also reference materials in the same chapter. So you can go and read a book if you like, an article, or watch a video to gain a better understanding of this. And then you have an assignment. So let's say that the first step is to really understand your hypothesis, what the problem is, and you need to speak to a few of your stakeholders. Please do that. Even if you don't do for many people, at least try it out and see, whether what you think is a problem and what the other thing is the same. So you do that, and on a Saturday, you have a session with me,
A live
and
session.
this is a live session, but while going through it, you should put in the comment session, or you have a WhatsApp group that we form. Keep asking questions, and where the issues are, clarifying it. So by the time you come on a Saturday, the questions are very clear. These are the 4 5 areas, and then you discuss on that. It's a discussion which happens, and then you continue. So that is broadly how the course is structured. And our feel is that by the end of the course, you should also find an answer to the problem that you're facing through this process. So it is almost like a toolkit that has been given with all the concepts and the process and the principles and philosophy. And you're putting together like a Lego tool, or you have a parts of the cycle and you're using this tool to put it together. So you get a sense of how the entire thing can be practiced. It's not so much about finding a solution, but you get a sense of how this can be put together. And we also insist that with every week there is also a PDF document which comes to you, or the synopsis of that. And please keep making notes, because when you write it in your own language and your own understanding and with your own problem, it becomes yours. So that is where the magic happens. So in many ways, the course is not prescriptive at all. It's not like you can take this and apply it. It is almost like it's the dots in the puzzle, and you need to connect the dots in the puzzle. And when you do that is when it becomes your own. It's Sandhya's version versus center of gravity's version. But you'll still have the core lenses to look at it. That's
So
how
will
broad.
they, so these are all one-on-one sessions, or are there any group sessions as well? So
So
is yeah,
this is a
go on.
group session which happens on a weekend. An hour we take, and that we come together and we talk about it. But there is this WhatsApp group where you can chat, and you can also learn from others. That's one. Or in the comment section, you can have a regular interaction with me. While you're doing it, what are the things that you're going through. But the live session is a group session. But there are sometimes people miss out, and then you want to have an individual session with me. That's possible.
And how do you assess? How do you assess their growth? You as the person who's managing the course, running the course, rather.
Yeah. So for me, it is, if they feel uncomfortable, then I think we are doing the right thing, because then you're taking them out of a zone which they're not comfortable. They're not able to really understand, grasp, etc. So, and naturally, if there are more questions, that's a sign that you're learning. So that's what on a very qualitative basis, I am. But we also have a formal assessment, which you have questions asked from a very application perspective. So get a sense of whether you understood the concept. But it also helps you, like they'll be close to 100 questions, and by the end of the course, let's say that after 3 months you're going to practice, and you want to get a sense of how do you define a loyalist, hypothetically. You can quickly go through it and get it in and absorb it much faster for that reason. But it's more of putting you in a discomfort zone, you're struggling and you're asking more questions, is a sign that you're learning something new.
That was wonderful, Dilip. Thank you so much. I think we're now ready to have Sagar, our one of the students from the first session. I think it'd be nice to have him on and hear his thoughts about what his experience was like with the course. Sagar, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah. First thoughts about the course were that how am I going to finish the course in such amount of time, and because it was very demanding. It is a very demanding course. It's not something that is very easy. You'll need to dedicate a lot of time. So figuring out time was the first biggest challenge, and once that happened, then things just happened in flow for me. The course, if you look at the course nights, it's etched out very well. It has, you first understand what are these principles that they want to talk about, and what is this process all about, how you will be taken through this process step by step. So learning about the process, the basics of the process, and then integrating them in the learnings when it comes to finding a proper strategy for a client or for a brand, it becomes very easy. So for me, that is the whole gist of what it was for me. But there are many things that I want to talk about. because there were many ups and downs. It's not something that will happen, because the problem with a lot of marketing people is that they want to get straight to the bottom of the what is the solution to this. You are going to explore this. You are going to explore the entire arena and understand, okay, these are the solutions that can happen. These are the directions, like Dilip was saying, this is where I should not look at this moment in time. So priorities and making sure that you are sticking to the core of the business and the strengths of the business, that is what will happen, or maybe you will figure out during the course.
And how did you discover the course?
The discovery of course. So I was going through one of the YouTube videos of Jayamit Doshi on YouTube about HippoBrains, when he was talking to Rajesh Sahadevan about this entire process, and this process was something that really stuck with me, and it stayed with me, that I want to know, because see, where I come from is digital, where you are always looking at numbers, where you always want to look at growth, and the success is that if the numbers are growing, then the leads are growing, then the customers are happy, etc., etc. But you still don't know who the customer is, and that was my biggest problem. That I want to know who this person looks like. What is this? Why do they want to buy it? And that particular video, the YouTube video where Jamit is talking to Rajesh Sahadevan, it gave me a complete idea, and then it was through many people that I figured out that this is the right place to be. I learned about what their process is on the website. I had a chat with them, and things happened, and that is how I got to know and enrolled in the course. Best way, I think this was maybe the best decision that I've taken in the entire lockdown, because it's not just about skills. See, things are changing and moving very quickly when it comes to marketing. You will end up focusing on numbers a lot, but it is taking you away from why the business and the brand exists in the first place. So this was coming back to that for me.
So you are in the space of digital marketing. I know that. How do you apply? So, typically it is believed that market research and, these kind of activities are conducted by brands, and they fall on the bandwidth of brand marketing, right? How do you take what you've learned and apply that digitally?
That's a good question. How do I take what I've learned and apply it digitally? Look, the basics are not going to change. So, for example, the client that I recently got to work with is a music retail store based in Bombay itself, and they came to me with the problem that the traffic is not moving up, the sales are not happening on the website digitally. So they came with a digital problem, saying that these are things that are not happening. What do I do? But when I checked the website, everything was fine. There was no problem as such. I mean, the traffic is okay. I mean, for some time it could be less or more, but their rankings were in place. Everything was in place. So where is the problem? The problem was that people are not buying, but why? You need to understand the why behind why customers are not wanting to buy your products at this point in time. With this course, what I figured out was that if I lay everything on the table, look at the context and understand and study this customer and look at his problems from where they are, things become very clear. So even though this problem came from a digital point of view, it ended up being a human problem at the end of the day, because there are people who are sitting and doing their business online. Even if it is digital, you have to go back to people and see where it is coming from. If it's not going to be, even if it's a digital problem and your digital is fine, your hygiene is okay, obviously you need to look at the customer. So when you look at the customer, you are able to figure out all kinds of problems. So that is how I applied things in the digital space. Now we are working towards a recommendation where I'm at a stage where I've finished the course. I'm at a stage where I'm going to give him recommendations around making sure that because the brand's entire positioning and their entire promises around building a good music community by giving their products. So sticking to that. So this person had sort of moved away from this entire promise. Now we are focusing on that again, and because live music is not happening, but how can we do this online? Is it possible to do online? These are the recommendations that I'm working on right now.
Nice. That sounds very nice. So essentially, you're already applying what you've learned
Yeah,
in not just a problem that you were working on to begin with, right? Like not as a case study, not something like a case study, but something that you're actually applying in real life for your real life clients. That's really
absolutely.
nice.
Yeah.
So Sagar, what would you if let's assume somebody who's listening to us right now would like to join the course, what would you like to tell them about what you need to be prepared for, what stage in life do you need to be, or anything that you would like to tell somebody who is thinking or considering joining the course?
Stop looking at results always. We do things to meet an objective, but if you are always focused on this is what I need to get out from this, that is not a good starting point, because you are going to explore a lot of things in this course. Explore, and keeping the objective in mind, but exploring so that you understand everything. Not be myopic about only the results, because that is going to keep you just in one lane. You are opening all the lanes. And as in the course, they say that you are uncovering the elephant. That process itself is beautiful, and you will see that, oh my God, there's so much to do. So, for example, in my case, I realized that there is another market that this guy has not tapped, and it is a potential market for the existing customers also, where sales can happen and growth can happen. So, did you know about that? He did not know about this. So, for anyone who's going to join this course, be completely, of course, about discipline and all that, but make sure that you want to explore things than just looking at the final output and saying, no, this is what I want. I think marketers end up doing that because that is how their success is determined finally. How much growth has happened, what has happened finally. Their output is going to take you away from exploring the beauty of what this entire process is all about.
That sounds lovely, Sagar. Thank you for your positive feedback. Actually, it really helps. We have about 10 minutes left, so we will be taking some questions from people who are listening to us. I think we have Dilip on board. Sagar, any last words for Dilip? Dilip, any last words for Sagar?
Last words for Dilip. Thank you so much for mentoring and guiding me through this process. It's been, you know how the process has been. Sometimes it's been very frustrating where you don't get things when you feel that, because of the times that we are living in right now. One of the things is that getting the kind of people to talk to interview, because right now people are a little hesitant. Sometimes they don't give you time. They're not commitment. They don't have commitment to these things. So these are the things that will happen, but eventually things happen, and Dilip was very persistent, positive about the feedback that he was giving me, also trying to tell me what are the things that I should be looking at if I'm missing out. So he's been a great mentor. To be very honest, I've learned a lot from him. And going ahead, I would like to see more of him, and I have told this to him that I'm going to pester with a lot of questions also in the future. So let's hope for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sagar. Dilip, we have a lot of questions. I can see. Would you like to answer some of them? We'll take one of them. Take them one at a time. So Manoj Nath is asking, great talk, Dilip. How do you measure the outcome of HCT?
Yeah, there is a lag and lead indicator like with any problem, right? So one outcome which clients tells us a great understanding of the problem, a great clarity of the diagnosis of the problem. So it allows us to take trade-offs. What should be the core, what should not be the core, and allows them to take decisions and actions. That's one. Second is it brings tremendous alignment to the team, and that's what sometimes leadership struggle with. Once your alignment is there, then you can go out and rectify your solutions. But if that's not there, then it becomes much more difficult. So alignment is the second one, and the final thing is that eventually it needs to result in business results, hard numbers. It needs to happen. That is the final outcome. If that doesn't happen, you don't get repeat business.
Okay. Fair enough. I hope, Manoj, you're satisfied with the answer. Moving on, we have two people who asked somewhat similar question. We have Rajesh Gopal, who's also suggested the same thing as Shreyan Mullik Chaudhary. Both of them are asking, how is human-centered thinking? It sounds very similar to design thinking. How is it similar or different? And Shreyan is taking it one step further. He's also asking, if I'm not in a position to practice or apply in real life for 2 years after the course, will this course be for me?
I think that's an easier one to answer. The second one, I'll come to the first one. Second one is an absolute no. Please don't take it now, because if you don't apply it, and especially if you're going to get a 2-year gap, please take it when you feel that you're going to apply it, right? Uh, because it clarifies a thinking process and it can be applied in many phases of life. But if you feel that, definitely my recommendation is please don't take it. To the second one, which is the strategy process. It's a very old construct. In fact, which Rajesh talks about. I completely agree with it. The process is pretty much the same. So in terms of the design thinking and human-centered thinking, right? I think the difference is in the practice of it, is what I feel. So in our work, we also work with a lot of design agencies, and the process can be same, but in the practice, some of the differences, from my observation, one is that in human-centered thinking, when you're understanding the customer, we spend a lot of time in understanding the customer's life script, not necessarily the category. Obviously, you understand the category. So when we also started our practice, a lot of time goes into understand the category. So if it is Javed, I will try to understand Javed's relationship with banking and what really happens in that process. What are the compromises? How the purchase process? What are the issues with the product and all of that? But here, what we discovered over a period is that one, people are not really interested in your brand or in your product. It's a very peripheral thing in their life, and what they're really interested in their life. And some of the core motivations which drives the category, comes from your life script. So you spend a lot of time in understanding the people as people. Okay. And once you understand Javed, for instance, if I take the Javed's conversation, the entire motivation to show that he is not a black sheep in the family and to show that, he can be successful and, he can, that motivation will come in the way his house decor looks, the way Javed's dressing will come across, the way, the kind of banks he will select, you will start seeing it in many, many categories. So that's one. Second is you taking everyone along with it. And these are all softer elements, As you said that when the client comes and saying that this is my problem, you accept it. It's on face value. And then you go together. And the entire alignment building process of really taking people through this journey of being in the bunker, getting a touch and feel, emotionally connecting to these people and getting, by the end of it, they get a sense that this is like my father, my friend, and I should do the right things. And naturally, I'll do the right things. So these are all softer elements and how it is practiced. I think the difference comes from there. It's not, if you take any strategy process, it's pretty much this. And we start with the hypothesis, you have several variants, you go to the market, you test it, refine it. We all know that, But I think the difference is in the practice of it. It's almost like you practice it like an investigative journalist, you're getting a cue from here, then you're saying that, hey, we started off saying that we will go and meet this person, but let's actually shortcut it. We should go change the direction right now from here, So it's very chaotic. So it may not, it has allowed us, because we are a boutique firm and we pretty much practice like Puritans, Sometimes our projects overshots by time, but we feel that this is what we need to do. And from a business sense, it may not make sense, but we continue to do that. So I think it's the way you practice it is where the difference comes from.
Fair enough. I've actually, I understand where you're coming from. And having worked with, having spoken to you, Rajesh, Vijay, and Navin, I know how close you are to the stories. And I can, when you're telling me and narrating the stories, I can see that you're in that moment transported to that time where you were hearing that story from the customers themselves. So I think you're right. It is about the approach in many ways.
Yeah, and many times you have to take the clients through that feeling. And once that happens,
then to the next question, Dilip, which actually brings us to the next question. Okay. Anshul Agarwal is asking, he's saying, consider that I am the CEO of a publicly listed large company. I have identified a problem and found a human-centered approach. How do I convince my shareholders that this is the right approach?
Yeah. So one, I think Anshul has a hypothesis thinking it is a long-term solution. It is definitely it's a sustainable solution to a business. That means you're not going to keep, after 6 months, saying that, hey, doesn't look like, I've understood it completely. So that rarely happens. But as I
Yeah.
told that you don't get the solution accurately right. So first thing is that it needs to work in the short run, without doubt. That means once you take your decision, you go into the market, you have to start seeing results in the next 4 months. Okay. Otherwise, there is no value to it, and it refines your understanding. Uh, it has to have some results in form of saying that I tried it in this geography, and I can see, maybe more customer walk-ins are happening. It has to have that. So without a short term, there is nothing like a long term in today's day and age. It needs to work. And so what it allows is that it gives you a sustainable business solution. That doesn't mean that it works only in the long term. It works in the short term, but you're in the right path.
As you also said, right, like I think when you were narrating the story of Javed, you said that even if you have limited resources, it points you in the right direction. And of the 4 or 5 things that you have listed as the problem areas that need to be worked on, it tells you that, oh, I need to, it tells you exactly which one you need to focus on. So that is in many ways a short term solution too, with a nice, long tail to it.
Absolutely. And so what it allows to the clients is that it gives a spectrum of the diagnosis of the problem. Like, you have to definitely address this three. That is where your biggest business results is going to come. And that is where you can't afford much of a failure. Like, failures have to be celebrated, everything we talked about. But the other three, maybe it's a little long term. You can experiment and you can try out something. And it also allows that, it is not a very blank statement saying that you should embrace failure. I mean, you can't embrace failure in some of the core things. That I get a clarity and I need to get it right. It will affect my business. But other parts, maybe I have a little bit of time. I can experiment a little bit. Maybe you want your team to go through it and get a sense of how failure happens. You can then say that these are the projects they should focus on. So a lot of those clarity emerges.
But just thinking about this, I just realized that it's not just a one-man army, right? When even if you give a solution, let's assume it has to be a cultural shift in the organization, right? Because it has to, even if it is coming from the top management, for example, like the top management approached you and you've convinced them, it has to, be passed on down to the lower management as well, who can eventually then execute it, right? So in many ways, you have to take the entire there is a cultural shift in the organization and you have to take the organization together with you.
You're right. See, even in our practice, like when we started off, there were days when we felt like we were like really great professionals, which delivered a great strategy, but really didn't move us. And there were days we felt that we transformed people, that we transformed ourselves. We went through a journey which we felt that something changed in us, and then something changed in our clients. And I won't say that every project had that. More and more we want to. We started practicing. Then we identified the principles. What really works. When people find their own solutions, is when it becomes powerful. So when that happens, then it will start distilling down to the lowest part of the organization because leaders believe in it. If not, it becomes a very powerful PowerPoint presentation getting dusted in one corner. You will get a standing ovation for what you did, but nothing happens. And we have seen both.
So this actually brings us to the next question. Do you, Venkataramanan, he's asking, how long does it take for such an organizational transformation? Especially a company that's in the B2B reputed in the B2B sector and starts to go in a certain direction. There is an entire organization, transformation in place, right? One is how he's asking how would you advise us to go to it, and how much time frame it would. What would be the time frame?
Hi, do you? I mean, we have worked with, DU in our previous, some of our clients, and he has moved out from there. So that's a question which I don't know whether I can have a answer. But what we have seen is that, like even the organization where DU had worked with, it is primarily a B2C company, which was going to B2B, that we have done some work. So what happens is that it takes some time. One, you get a really understanding, but internally, it takes time for you to put the structures and culturally it's different, B2B versus B2C. So while you understand what the customer needs, that you can get a very good understanding from the process, what are the competitive content, how you should really position yourself. And then you may have to pilot it in a geography because you have to get your structures and how you can really fulfill that promise. And there will be many elements which needs to come into place. So in this organization, I think it took close to 6 months by the time they actually started serving them, but the results happens over a long period of time. So there are so many different parts to it, even if you understand the proposition and how you need to go into the market, you need a backend which needs to be really in place for making the transition. So yeah, I don't know whether there's an answer to that, how much time it takes, but once a company has taken the decision, I think, in a 3 to 6 months frame, you should be able to hit the market, at least in the geography, pilot it, refine it, and move forward.
Dilip, every time I listen to your stories and other stories by COG, Center of Gravity, I always get the feeling that when you hit the bed at night, you must be feeling so satisfied with the work you do. And that's actually something that you pointed out as well while earlier, that it's fairly life-changing.
It is. I think that is something which I feel like, if I have to personally look at it, it gives you a sense of purpose to your profession, and I remember long back, I started my career in advertising, and I was dropping my younger son to his school, and somebody asked me, what do you do? And I told about it, and he's saying that, oh, this is like, the smart guys winking and taking customers for a ride. I mean, that's what marketing is known as, right? And then when you practice it with this purpose at the heart of it, saying that you're here to add value, you're here to serve, you're not here to sell. And once that it sinks in your head, then you look at things very, very differently, and then the way you practice the profession, the way you make recommendation, the way you see yourself, all of that fundamentally changes. And that is a huge benefit of doing this work, is what I feel. I feel definitely privileged to be able to practice this with a group of friends, and we are a group of friends, so that makes it much more easier to do that. Yeah, without doubt.
And that's one of the reasons why I hold all of you in very, very high regard. And I hope people who listen to us also find value in what we've spoken right now, and they check out the course. Navin has posted the details in the comment section. Anybody who wants to check it out, you can either go to school.centerofgravity.in or check the link that is posted in the comments. And if you have any questions ever, reach out to us. We are very active on all social media channels. And even if you're not interested in the course, it's okay, not a problem. You can still share all the. We're very regular. We're posting a lot of the stories that we have accumulated over the years from the different walks of life. They're beautiful. I get goosebumps practically every time I listen to one story, and I'm pretty sure you will too. So follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and be part of the community. Very happy to have you all here.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking your time. Thank you, Sandhya. It's a wonderful conversation.
Absolutely. My pleasure completely. So goodbye, everyone. So that's about it.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.